The normal thought of picking up the golden finger is punch the orc, kick the pope, marry Bai Fumei and reach the pinnacle of life. Ryan, a tech dog, thinks harvesting and gun farming, sleazy development, until the last wave of survival. When grains pile up in mountain bags, modern cavalry gallops on the grasslands, and nations crawl at his feet. Ryan sat high on the throne, looked around, and slowly raised a middle finger, saying, "Who else is there?" Lord's farming script, no harem, exploratory gold finger, keywords of the novel. From pioneering lords to kings with no pop-ups, from pioneering lords to kings. Download the complete text, and read the latest chapters from Pioneering Lords to Kings. Chapter 1. Your Excellency, give up resistance. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Your Excellency, give up resistance. Where is this? Who are you? Ryan stared blankly at the tall figure ahead, murmuring as if in a dream. The figure was enveloped in a hazy golden light, emitting a peaceful aura. It seemed to be situated in the Milky Way, like a towering mountain bank, quietly overlooking Ryan like an ant. Behind him is a grand and holy palace, with a colorful giant mirror suspended above it, reflecting colorful light. Ryan widened his eyes, desperately trying to see the figure under the light, but only a glimmer of dazzling light bloomed, and his eyes turned into a vast expanse of white. When the light dissipated, the figures disappeared, the palace turned into ruins, and the mirror turned into countless fragments scattered in all directions. The largest piece rushed towards him like a shooting star in his desperate gaze. Ryan suddenly woke up, panting heavily and his heart beating like a drum. It took him a while for him to recover and reach out to wipe his forehead, bringing up a series of beads of sweat. Feeling around, he sat up and lit the oil lamp to dispel the darkness in the tent. It's the second time. Ryan rubbed his swollen temples and muttered to himself, feeling tired. This is the second time he has had this strange dream since he found that thing. Bastard, what the hell are you? Ryan slapped his head in a frenzy, as if he was about to kick something out. After being furious for a while, the thing remained motionless in his mind. He had no choice but to once again recognize reality and lay down dejectedly, staring blankly at the shimmering oil lamp, beginning to contemplate life. After all, his experiences in the past few years are as outrageous as the stories made up by minstrels. His full name is Ryan Ray Black. At the age of 16, on a dark and stormy night, the owner of this body took his own life to break through the night. And he happened to cross over and come to occupy the magpie's nest, becoming the current Ryan, and relay to break through the night. In his past life, he was an ordinary engineering single dog on Blue Star, but on his way to work, he was taken away by a speeding baby stroller that took away his young life. He died with great frustration and strangeness. Fortunately, the goddess of luck blessed him and brought him back to life, but he couldn't bear to be excited. As soon as he fused the memories of the original owner, his brain crashed. Because the world he is currently in is very dangerous, although there are some shadows of medieval Europe, it is two completely different worlds. Dookie, magic, gods. Various supernatural powers collectively influence the continent named Oja. Both generations of King Ryan were knights in control of extraordinary powers, possessing a small fiefdom in the ancient kingdom of Titan, which was enough to lead him to a life of infamous nobility. But he couldn't be happy at all, because pie wouldn't fall from the sky. On the third day after his journey, His Majesty the Great King issued a conscription order for him, allowing him to step onto the battlefield and fight for the kingdom. For the past 2 years, he has been struggling on the battlefield, enduring all the hardships, and every time he thinks of it, it is a bitter tear. I don't know where the Viscount's army is. It wouldn't be good if we encountered a large army of the Andes. Ryan lifted the curtain of the tent, and the howling wind and snow outside cast a shadow over his already tired heart. That's right, Ryan lost his way on the battlefield. Just 7 days ago, Ryan's unit was defeated on the front battlefield, and during a strategic retreat, Ryan accidentally entered a mountain range. There, it was the closest he had ever been to death. A sound of hooves interrupted Ryan's thoughts. He frowned and quickly extinguished the oil lamp, gripping the hilt tightly in his hand, his eyes fixed on the pitch-black space ahead like eagles and falcons. In the pitch-black night, mixed with the sound of wind and snow, the sound of horse hooves comes from far to near. A thin layer of sweat slowly formed on Ryan's forehead, and his breathing became slightly faster. At least a dozen cavalry, mad, what are you afraid of? Ryan cursed softly. He was just a junior knight and had lost his mount. His chances of winning against a team of cavalry who dared to attack on a snowy night were less than half. He had thought about running away, but how could his 2 legs run better than someone else's 4 legs? It's better to give it a try. Approaching, in Ryan's perception, a circle had already formed and he was surrounded. But he breathed a sigh of relief in his heart, as the other party did not directly run over his tent, indicating that they wanted to catch what was alive. Although the scattered encirclement blocked his retreat, it also dispersed their manpower and gave him a chance to break through. He quietly arched his body, like a hunting leopard ready to reveal its fangs at any time. Your Excellency, you have been surrounded. Give up resistance. In the name of the Kingdom Knight, I promise you that I will give you treatment that matches your status. A knight riding a high horse slowly stepped forward. His voice was as piercing as a cold wind, yet it fell in Ryan's ear like a refreshing February spring breeze. What a familiar voice. Is it the knight Alan? He asked calmly. The person outside was noticeably stunned for a moment and reflexively said, I'm Alan Davis, are you? After receiving a positive answer, Ryan suddenly breathed a sigh of relief. Grandma, it's nothing to worry about. This is a friendly army. He lifted the curtain and walked out, the cold wind mixed with ice particles entering his neck, causing him to shiver slightly. Looking at his cold and resolute face, Ryan felt so familiar at the moment. He smiled and opened his arms, saying, It's so delightful to see you here, Knight Alan. Alan finally saw Ryan's face at this moment and said somewhat surprised, Are you? Sir Ryan. Are you still alive? It seems like this at the moment. Ryan's mouth twitched slightly, and in just a few days, Sudan had put himself on the list of casualties. I'm sorry, I shouldn't be so impolite. Ellington also realized his language mistake, especially for a nobleman with a fiefdom, even if he was just the lowest jazz. Ryan smiled and waved his hand, saying, It's not time to worry about these things now, Knight Alan. I lost my way while chasing the enemy. May I ask how the battle is now? Do you have any news from the Viscount? Speaking is an art, although he got lost while running away, it doesn't prevent him from slightly beautifying himself. This is a good character that a nobleman should possess. But he didn't say too much either, after all, Alan and he served in the same army, and there were several intersections between the two. They boasted too much and it wouldn't be easy to come back. Alan signaled to everyone to disperse their guard and dismounted, saying, The current situation is very unfavorable for us, but Your Excellency the Viscount has stabilized the front line. Now we are sent out to gather the troops, and Your Excellency is the first living person we have encountered. Ryan looked back and indeed found that they were all 1 person and 2 horses, carrying a lot of supplies. At the same time, he was slightly surprised. He didn't expect that after encountering such a defeat, the Viscount could still stabilize the front line. He was truly a pioneering lord from the kingdom's border, much stronger than the wine bags and rice bags in the kingdom's hinterland. After a few more pleasantries, Alan ordered someone to give him a horse and let Ryan pack up and set off. He had a task to attend to and didn't want to delay too much. A few minutes later, the caravan disappeared into endless wind and snow. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Breakthrough of Gifts from Dragons. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2 Breakthrough of Gifts from Dragons. After 2 days of consolidation, Alan's army has grown to over 200 people. Although the number has increased many times, the route he chose has become increasingly remote. Ryan could see clearly that in his team, there were only 2 knights, myself and Alan, and more than 20 cavalry. The rest were all wounded infantry and even serfs. This not only slowed down their marching speed, but also increased the risk of exposure exponentially. On such a plain, the Andes only needed a cavalry team of 50 people to defeat them. Looking back at the sparse team, although there were only a few days left on the journey, he inexplicably had a bad feeling in his heart. At this moment, Alan, who was leading the way ahead, stopped and ordered everyone to camp overnight by the creek, causing a burst of cheers in the queue. Marching in the wind and snow is a great test for them, as their physical strength is already exhausted by the end of the day. Although Ryan felt that camping here was not appropriate, seeing the tired faces of everyone, he knew it was necessary. If they were forced to move forward, these people would probably fall in half. Ordering people to take care of the horses, Ryan sat down on a stone by the stream and began to meditate and regulate his breath. During this time, he had not practiced well, which was quite unfamiliar to Ryan, who had always been disciplined. It's still early, so it's time to cultivate. He practiced his own ancestral secret technique. Although it was just an ordinary fighting chi secret technique, his cultivation speed was extremely fast. However, in just 2 years, he felt like he was about to reach the threshold of an intermediate knight. Ryan sat cross-legged on the stone, the snowflakes melting before they fell. If you look closely, you will find a faint purple light enveloping his body. Alan had just returned from a tour when he was instantly attracted by the purple light on his body and frowned. This was not a wave of fighting spirit. Why does this aura resemble the magical fluctuations on those magicians? Is he a magician? Alan was somewhat shocked, as he had never heard of a person who could sense magic even when feeling combative. This is really a bit sensational, some beyond his understanding. Ryan didn't know that he had inadvertently acted up and shocked a mid-level knight, but he only knew that he was also very confused now. At this moment, in his mind, there was an orange-red diamond crystal the size of a thumb, with a faint purple dragon swimming within it. The crystal is slightly suspended, slowly rotating, and some purple mist is absorbed along with the rotation of the crystal. Ryan was a bit flustered at the moment. He didn't know why he saw this thing in his mind instead of a brain teaser. Even in such an extraordinary world, this situation is quite explosive. The origin of this crystal is quite convoluted. It was obtained by him in the mountains when he got lost, and its source was a large lump of dragon feces. That's right, Ryan saw the legendary dragon in that mountain range. Before that, he had always thought that dragons were just extraordinary creatures that existed in storybooks, and even joked about becoming dragon-slaying warriors. After seeing the truth, Ryan realized that he was wrong, and it was outrageous. The giant dragon only revealed a slight aura, and as it passed over his head, its legs trembled and it crawled to the ground. Even if the evil dragon was hovering by his side, he dared not speak out due to its lewd power, and could only tremble on the side. The true pride of the so-called intruder could not be seen in him. After the dragon left, he saw the strange crystal next to the flying one. He thought it was some kind of gem. After all, dragons are famous for their love of treasures. As a result, at the moment his fingers touched it, the crystal instantly transformed into a stream of light that rushed into his mind. This scared him to death, and it took him a while to realize that it didn't have much impact on him before he finally let go. After that, he had the same nightmare for several times in succession, often waking up at night. And now, in meditation, he saw the appearance of this thing for the first time, which made him a little uneasy, not knowing what impact it would have on him. Perhaps I can try to communicate with it. Ryan muttered to himself. Do whatever you say. He concentrated all his mental energy to wrap the crystal and try to touch it. In the moment when the spiritual power covered, the crystal visibly trembled. Subsequently, a crystal clear purple liquid was seen forming at the bottom of the crystal and then dripping down. Ryan suddenly felt a mysterious force spreading to his limbs in an instant. He could clearly feel that his body was undergoing subtle changes, which shocked him because it was a change he had been practicing hard for several days. Now, such a drop of liquid has achieved such an effect. I found a treasure. This was his first thought, and as he held back his excitement, he continued to wrap his mental energy around the crystal. Sure enough, another drop of liquid dripped down. Several drops of liquid dripped down in a short amount of time, and he achieved the effect that had only been achieved in the past few decades. This feeling intoxicated him. After using the seventh drop of liquid, he didn't continue because he keenly noticed that the little dragon inside the crystal had shrunk by more than half. Is this little dragon these liquids? And what are the conditions for its regeneration? Does it absorb those purple mist? Ryan immediately felt a little distressed. This purple mist was too magical. If it had a continuous stream of purple mist, wouldn't becoming a legendary knight be a piece of cake? Unfortunately, the purple liquid is limited, and he has not yet mastered the method of regeneration. We'll have to study it slowly in the future. Fortunately, he's not someone who delves into details, so if he can't figure it out, he'll take it slow. Well, I'll call you Longjing in the future, and as for this purple liquid, it's called Yuanli. Ryan casually named the treasure he found and then withdrew from his meditation state. When he opened his eyes, he found Alan staring at him with a shocked expression, as if he had seen some monster, which made him somewhat unhappy. Your current behavior does not conform to noble etiquette, Knight Alan. No one wants to be constantly watched during cultivation, even a knight with excellent reputation. Alan recognized the displeasure in his tone and quickly moved his eyes, saying apologetically, I'm sorry, Sir Ryan. It's just that you broke through too quickly, which shocked me. Breakthrough. Ryan suddenly realized that he had already made it to the intermediate level knight. The 18-year-old intermediate level knight was already considered a genius. Thank you for the gift from the dragon, he said with some emotion. Dragon. Alan was puzzled for a moment. Ah, it's nothing, Knight Alan. May I ask if the campsite has been set up? Ryan quickly changed the subject. He didn't intend to let anyone know about the dragon, and if he said it, no one would believe it. Alan is a traditional knight who adheres to the 8 virtues. Although he has many doubts in his heart, they are Ryan's privacy, and he will not pursue them without Ryan's words. He nodded and said, it's already set up, but the scouts have made new discoveries. There are traces of Andean cavalry nearby, so we probably can't start a fire. Alan's words made Ryan's heart sink. In such bad weather, not being able to start a fire means there is no flame to keep warm at night, and there will be no hot water or cooked food. For the extraordinary, it's not a problem, but their soldiers are going through a difficult time. For them, this will be a disaster. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. The correct use of encounter warpower. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. The correct use of encounter warpower. Ryan and his team struggled through this night. In the morning, soldiers reported that 3 people had died and more than 10 had been frostbitten last night, and their morale was somewhat low. Due to the year-round freezing of this land, it was impossible to excavate, and in the end, the bodies of these 3 soldiers could only be buried in ice and snow. They were unable to take these bodies away, which would be a great burden. Ryan looked at everything coldly. In the past 2 years on the battlefield, he had seen too much death. From the initial fear to the current numbness, he had completely transformed. The team quickly set off, and Ryan could clearly feel that the morale of the team was very low. But he also knew how difficult it was for the team to sustain itself in such a situation, as they were all professional soldiers and elite members of the kingdom. If it were for those conscripted militia, they would have already become deserters when the front line collapsed. I hope everything goes smoothly, Ryan muttered to himself as he looked at the hazy sun on the horizon. I don't know if his prayer worked, but for the next 2 days it remained calm, even the snow and wind calmed down a lot. In the past 2 days, Ryan has been meditating every day, and indeed, he has discovered a new change in the dragon crystal. Every day, the little dragon within the dragon crystal. The source power will increase slightly, and this has been the case for 2 consecutive days. So he came to the conclusion that the source power within the dragon crystal could be generated on its own, about 1 drop a day. This discovery made him ecstatic, and his biggest concern was resolved. It's really a magical substance, I just don't know how it's generated. Ryan sighed while practicing with the source power. He can only be certain that the generation of the source power is related to the purple mist continuously absorbed by the dragon crystal, but he still has no idea what component the purple mist is in the air. A drop of source power is quickly absorbed, although it still has a significant gain, its effect is slightly weakened compared to before. Ryan speculates that it may be due to his own breakthrough, but it also indicates that the help of the source force will become weaker and even ignored in the future. In this way, the value of the source power will be greatly reduced, he said with a frown. Hey, why don't I try taking out the source power? If it can be saved, even if it doesn't work for me in the future, I can trade it. Ryan slapped his head and became excited again. A treasure that can assist in cultivation is an irresistible temptation for any extraordinary person. Ryan said do it, and at the moment when the source power dripped, he immediately used his spiritual power to wrap it around, trying to guide it out of his conscious space. Consciousness space was named by Ryan himself because he couldn't describe which area of his brain dragon crystal actually existed in. As expected, Yuanli was smoothly dragged away from the vicinity of Longjing by him. Soon, Yuanli broke away from the consciousness space like penetrating a barrier. Unexpectedly, after leaving the consciousness space, the source force still exists in his body, and Ryan suddenly becomes Sparta. What's going on? Do you want to force it out? He immediately recalled his previous online novels and planned to force the source force out of his fingertips. As he thought, everything went smoothly, and he clearly felt that the source force had reached his right arm through a channel from his brain. Just as he reached his fingertips, a mutation occurred, and the source force merged directly with his right arm. A powerful force suddenly exploded from his arm. Ryan tried waving it a few times and found a significant increase in speed and strength. It took a full half-hour to return to normal. Can Gimli still strengthen body parts? Ryan was both surprised and delighted. If that's the case, he needs to re-examine the value of Gimli. He wanted to try again, but looking at the source power inside the dragon crystal, he estimated that there were only 3 drops left, so he had to dispel this unrealistic idea. A new usage of source power was developed, and Ryan was in a good mood. He looked up at the sky and saw snowflakes falling like willow catkins. Night had already fallen, and the camp had started to light a fire while it was still dark. Everything was normal. Just as he was about to move around, a sharp cry came from afar into Ryan's ear, which was the scout's equipped whistle arrow. Ryan suddenly turned pale and shouted loudly, "Enemy attack, enemy attack." The busy people in the camp were obviously stunned for a moment, and then they became confused. Some of them rushed to extinguish the fire, and some of them climbed onto the horse. All of a sudden, they became a mess. Fortunately, Alan remained calm in the face of danger and shouted loudly, "Cavalry immediately mount their horses and hide their bodies. Infantry surround the supplies and form a formation. These soldiers are truly the elite border troops of the Kingdom of Tiztan." Although they were initially a bit panicked and disoriented, they quickly followed Alan's orders. Ryan and Alan had already planned for this type of encounter, with Alan leading cavalry to wander and maneuver on the side of the formation, waiting for an opportunity to divide the enemy. And Ryan led the remaining infantry to resist the positive pressure. Alan quickly led a few cavalry to hide their figures in the darkness and snow, while Ryan also commanded the remaining soldiers to form a simple curved formation, exuding a sense of awe for a moment. Da-da-da, a chaotic sound of hooves sounded, but in an instant, a well-equipped cavalry carrying flags pierced through the snow like pitch-black arrows, silently charging towards Ryan's army formation. Ryan only felt his adrenaline soaring, and it was impossible to see how many people there were in the dark, but definitely over 50. He could clearly feel a slight commotion in the team and knew what he needed to do, otherwise the team was likely to collapse. Night Guardian. Ryan raised his long sword, his fighting spirit turning into a cyclone around him. In an instant, a shield wall formed at the front of the team, protecting the soldiers in the front row. Although it is just the most ordinary knightly combat technique, the courage and confidence brought to these ordinary soldiers are obvious. The Andes cavalry, like an indestructible spearhead, charged towards the tightly arranged military formation with an unstoppable momentum. At the moment when the warhorse collided with the army formation, a loud voice came from the Andes people's team. Night Charge. The dazzling light bloomed, and the vast fighting spirit connected the entire team into a whole, transforming it into a gun head, fiercely hitting Ryan's shield wall. Click. Ryan's shield wall shattered like glass after only a few breaths, and the shield soldiers in the front row were directly smashed by the platoon with their shields. The cone-shaped head of the Andes army rushed in like a bamboo, but was soon stabbed into a blood gourd by Ryan's henchmen. But their subsequent cavalry kept pouring in from the gap, and Ryan wielded a knight's sword, splitting several people in half in a row, unstoppable in courage. But soon he was stopped by an Andes knight, and after Ryan was blocked, the Andes people quickly cut the formation apart. They only needed to turn their direction and make another attack, and Ryan and the others would become lambs waiting to be slaughtered. The one who stopped Ryan was a mid-level knight from the Andes, who was still above Ryan in strength. He had an exceptionally tall physique and a strong sense of oppression. In a moment of urgency, Ryan directly mobilized 2 drops of source power to strengthen his arms, and a surging force erupted in an instant. Night Slash. Ryan raised his knight's sword with both hands, gathered his fighting spirit, and tried his best to strike a sword. The burly knight's face suddenly changed, and he could only use his sword to resist. Block. Chong. The sword collided with the sword, and sparks burst forth in a moment. In the horrified gaze of the burly knight, Ryan's sword sliced his sword into 2 sections, and the sharp blade ran unobstructed across his neck. Welcome readers to join the group and play. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Surprise of the Magician. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Surprise of the Magician. All of this was just a moment of lightning and fire, and the Andes cavalry was turning around when they saw such a shocking scene. Their morale plummeted and they forgot to charge for a moment. Fortunately, they were elite soldiers who quickly reorganized themselves amidst the officers' screams and curses, preparing for the next charge. Adjust the formation and continue to defend. Ryan rode back and forth, breaking apart and regrouping. The pungent and bloody smell lingered at the tip of his nose, making him slightly excited. He knew it was difficult for him to resist, but he also knew that Alan was wandering around, looking for a chance to kill with one strike. Warriors, hold on to your long spear, wield your swords, and fight to the death without retreating. Ryan held the head of the burly knight high in his hand, injecting a shot of cardiotonic into the remaining soldiers under his command. No refund, no refund. Kill. The cheers of the soldiers echoed in unison, and their fighting spirit was high. Ryan's bravery deeply infected them. In this extraordinary world, personal strength is always admirable. The Andes cavalry was somewhat intimidated, and the formation became somewhat chaotic. It's now. Ryan squinted his eyes and said inwardly. Night Charge. Sure enough, in the next moment, more than 20 cavalry led by Alan bravely emerged from the snow and wind, and the majestic fighting spirit dispersed the snowflakes around them. The howling of the strong wind was drowned out by their roar. They were like sharp swords, cutting off the charging Andes cavalry from their waist. Alan held his 2-handed sword and led his cavalry to charge forward, while the screams of the Andes surrounded the unnamed battlefield. Ryan's serious face showed a hint of a smile, and Alan cleverly seized the opportunity to eat them now. Braves, charge. He pointed his long sword diagonally and led the morale-boosting soldiers straight towards the chaotic Andes. The small number of cavalry among them was a hard injury, and if he didn't quickly lead the infantry to surround them, there was a high possibility of a missed catch. When cavalry loses their speed, they are lambs waiting to be slaughtered. The battle lasted for about 10 minutes, and under the leadership of 2 intermediate knights, it was a completely one-sided massacre. These soldiers had no value as prisoners, so their heads were completely turned into military achievements. Ryan and his team are all professional soldiers, and military achievements are their main means of promotion. Except for the nobility, they rarely leave any survivors. Just as he was preparing to command the soldiers to clean the battlefield, Ryan suddenly felt a sudden jump in his head and instinctively bent down. Ah! Help! As soon as he lay on the horse's back, a scorching breath swept over his back, followed by 2 mournful screams echoing through the sky. Ryan suddenly looked up, 2 flames flickered away, and a burnt smell drifted into his nose with the wind. However, in an instant, 2 cavalry companies with horses were burned to ashes, leaving no time for Alan to put out the fire. What a terrifying flame, if it had been just now. Ryan's back was instantly soaked in cold sweat, brushing past death once again. Approaching me, a magician has launched a surprise attack. Alan's eyes flashed with a hint of shock as he knew the trouble was big. Magicians hold a noble position among all extraordinary beings, and those who control the elements of heaven and earth will enjoy the same status and treatment as nobles in any human kingdom. Although knights are also known as the reserve army of nobles, in reality, they are far from being considered true nobles, and only knights with fiefdoms like Ryan can be considered true nobles. The nobility of a wizard lies not in its rare quantity, but in its terrifying destructive power. A fully prepared wizard is enough to easily slaughter a team of 100 people. Ryan had also dealt with wizards before, knowing their terrifying killing power. Quietly retreating to Alan's side, he said in a deep voice, "The other party has at least 2 beginner magicians. Let's prepare to disperse and break through." Alan said in a slightly dry voice, "I'm afraid we can't leave." As soon as the words fell, under the snow curtain, a well-equipped infantry appeared in front of Ryan with neat steps, thick hair and iconic tattoos representing their identity as Andes. Boom! They stopped neatly and uniformly, the sound of the big shield and spear landing like a drum. Ryan squinted his eyes and looked towards the center of the team. A black snow wolf flag fluttered in the wind, with 3 people standing under it. At first, one person was dressed in full armor, holding a large sword, unable to see his face clearly, and under his crotch was a giant wolf with snow white fur. The other 2 were dressed in gorgeous wizard robes, holding magic wands embedded with crystals in their hands, riding warhorses, with visible waves spreading around them. The Bormann family, Viscount Kaiser. Alan spoke in a low voice, with a hint of surprise in his tone. Although he couldn't see the person's face clearly, with the help of the flag and the snow wolf, he had already determined the identity of the newcomer. Countless noble emblems from both countries, only the Bormann family, known as the Wolf of Kuwait, in the Kingdom of Andes, used the snow wolf flag, and this Viscount Kaiser is the current head of the Bormann family, the highest commander of the Kingdom of Andes on this battlefield. He didn't actually confront the Viscount in Bana city, but instead led a small army to come here. Ryan also felt somewhat incredulous. You should know that this is almost the edge of the battlefield between the 2 countries. As the highest commander of a local battlefield, why did Kaiser appear here for no reason? He couldn't think of any targets worth attacking here, even though his mind was shattered. In fact, it's not just Ryan and others who can't figure it out, but even Viscount Cather himself is secretly cursing bad luck. I thought this trip was already hidden enough, but I didn't expect to bump into the Tiztan people here. He originally thought it was just a small group of scattered troops, so he sent his own guard knights to lead cavalry to eliminate them. Who knew that as soon as they went to see the Lord of Light? It was already too late when Kaiser discovered that he underestimated the enemy. It was the correct approach to quietly retreat with that thing, but the more he stepped back, the more angry he became. When did the Burman family suffer from this bird-like aura? I want to tear them apart. Kathir thought fiercely. Although there were only over 200 infantry left under his command, the two wizards beside him were his confidants. It's time to go all out, Knight Allen. Ryan pulled out a piece of cloth and struggled to bandage the wound on his right arm, which was a memorial left by a struggling soldier just now. Allen tightly held the hilt of his sword, with a look of death on his face. For a knight, dying in battle is also a good destination. Ryan doesn't want to be confessed here, but he doesn't want to be a prisoner because it requires a lot of money to redeem. The thought of having to spend all his money to redeem him made Ryan feel more uncomfortable than killing him. It's better to give it a try. Viscount Cather stared at them with his lone wolf-like eyes, until the two wizards next to him began to mutter words. Then he suddenly swung his big sword and said, "Crush them, leave none behind." Whispering softly. I can't change my status this weekend. I estimate that the signing will have to wait until next week. We will still keep updates before signing, please don't be stingy with your tickets. Very loudly, end of this chapter. Is that all for chapter 5? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Is that all for chapter 5? Braves, capture Viscount Cather alive, our achievements will forever be engraved on the border of the kingdom. Allen's long sword pointed out from afar, taking the lead in launching an attack. Sometimes crises and opportunities coexist. If Viscount Cather could be left behind, the situation on this battlefield would be changed by them. In that case, when the war is over, he will be able to join the ranks of the nobility and break free from the frontier. Ryan also launched an attack on his horse, but his charge was much slower. Although being a deserter was very shameful, his own life was more important at the critical moment. He didn't want to be buried with the king's ambition. On the contrary, upon learning that the opponent was Viscount Cather, the soldiers who had just been intimidated by the magician also became hot-hearted. That's the commander of the enemy, as long as he kills or captures prisoners, it's like a key to the door of the nobility, and from then on, he becomes a human being. At this moment, fear had been replaced by madness, and they rushed towards the charging Andes infantry with red eyes, like hyenas. Fireball technique, shwa 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 shwa, a series of fiercely burning fireballs curved gracefully in the snowy night, bringing death and destruction to the soldiers of Tiztan. As the only two knights, Ryan, even if deliberately obscene, could not block his dazzling light. One of the wizards took special care of him. Several scorching fireballs flew past Ryan's side, and every time the fireball arrived, he avoided it as if sensing something. Ryan didn't know why, nor did he have time to think about it. Because the magician saw Ryan wriggling left and right to avoid the fireball, he suddenly felt a little embarrassed and angry. A surge of magic surged out, and he sang a spell in his mouth, Thunderbolt technique. A dark blue lightning burst out from the crystal of the staff, but in an instant it fell from Ryan's head. Although Ryan dodged in time, the speed was too fast, and he only had time to tilt his head. Lightning struck directly on the armor on his shoulder, igniting it in flames and spreading a tingling sensation throughout his body. Ryan couldn't help but let out a moan. For a moment, Ryan's facial muscles hardened, and the expression of the magician casting the spell also froze. Ryan thought to himself, "WOC, why was this reaction when I was chopped? Is it thunder, rain, and little?" The magician's shattered heart said, "What is this guy carrying? Not to mention, he's not harmed at all, and he's still enjoying it all. What's going on? This is the most powerful initial spell, soul fading." Just as both sides were stunned, the warhorse under Ryan's crotch erupted at a speed of 200% due to stimulation, leading him towards the enemy line. The speed directly surpassed Allen, and he collided with the enemy with a firm and resolute stance. Even true knights like Allen were truly admired for his posture, and the soldiers were boosted in morale. Sayako charged wildly. Ryan had just regained his senses when he was greeted by the enemy's shield and a long spear like a forest. He felt like he was about to cry without tears, and in a moment of desperation, he had to use his combat technique. Knight Guardian, while using the last drop of source power to strengthen his right arm. Ryan charged forward with his protective light shield and rushed straight in, chopping melons and vegetables all the way like entering an uninhabited realm. The Andes people didn't expect Ryan to be so fierce, and their formation was disrupted before they remembered to counterattack, but it was already too late. Alan, who was one step behind, had already brought in a dozen surviving cavalry and killed them. The shield bearer blocking the front was directly split in half by Alan's sword. Knight Alan, capture the thief first, cover me and rush over. Ryan knew at this moment that his plan to apply oil on his feet had failed, and he immediately became furious, wanting to directly kill Viscount Cather. Okay. Although Alan had never heard of capturing the king before the thief, he roughly understood the meaning. He immediately slapped his warhorse and charged ahead of Ryan, with the remaining cavalry guarding Ryan in the middle, advancing in a conical shape. Viscount Kaiser saw a group of cavalry rushing towards him in a daze, and his eyelids jumped wildly. He quickly said, "Hurry, tear them apart." The magician beside him also noticed Ryan and the others, and immediately threw all the remaining magic away. Alan had just penetrated the thick human wall with his protective shield when an ice cone hit him head-on. He instinctively tilted his body, but was still pierced by the ice cone. He only felt a sharp pain in his chest, his breathing suddenly stopped, his eyes turned black, and then he fell off the horse in a whirlwind. Alan. Ryan let out a roar as he watched Alan fall from his horse in front of him, pulling his warhorse hard and his fighting spirit running to the extreme. Ah! A cavalry was struck by lightning and instantly turned into charcoal. Soon someone took over his position and continued to charge forward. Approaching, Ryan's breathing suddenly became rapid, and there were occasional screams coming from his side. The cavalry guarding him collapsed one after another on the charging road. Suddenly, a fireball shot straight at Ryan's chest, and after evading without success, he suddenly felt a sharp pain in his chest. He could even smell the burning smell of his flesh. Did it ultimately fail? It's a pity to have such a handsome face in this life. Ryan closed his eyes unwillingly, waiting for death to come. What he didn't notice was that at the moment when the fireball technique hit him, the dragon crystal in his consciousness space trembled violently, absorbing most of the fire elements in the fireball. After a while, Ryan regained his composure and found a large hole on his breastplate, surrounded by remnants of molten metal. Although his chest was burnt, it was just a skin injury that did not turn him into ashes. Thinking of the previous lightning, Ryan's lips couldn't help but rise upwards, and a crazy idea emerged in his heart. How could I be immune to his magic? Viscount Kaiser and two wizards were also shocked and stood there, resisting a fireball as if nothing had happened. What humanoid monster is this? Cathier, suffer. Night slash, while they were stunned, Ryan had already galloped up to them and struck with a sword. Viscount Kaiser was just an ordinary person and did not react from the shock at all. Fortunately, nearby magician reacted quickly and immediately pulled out a scroll to activate it. The blue six-pointed star shone, and a layer of magical shield immediately wrapped the three of them. Dang clang, the knight's sword, carrying a sharp fighting spirit, slashed at the shield, which only withstood for a moment before breaking apart. But another magician has already finished singing and fired an ice cone. Ryan's mind suddenly jumped, and he quickly tilted his body. The ice cone passed directly under his armpit, taking away a piece of flesh and blood. Ryan took a cold breath in pain, but his hand kept chopping out, with two round heads soaring into the sky. The remaining magician's liver and gallbladder were splitting, and he hurriedly took out a scroll to activate it, instantly enveloping himself in a black mist. Ryan stabbed his sword but pounced into the air. As the black mist dissipated, the figure of the magician had disappeared. Surprisingly, it's a rare, hidden scroll. Ryan frowned, feeling a bit helpless, not expecting the other party to even have such a rare scroll by their side. It is said that only mysterious great mages can create the hidden scroll, which can sell hundreds of jindlers. Just as Ryan was distracted, Kaiser's mount, the Snow Wolf, attempted to escape. Just a few steps away, it was nailed to the ground by a knight's sword thrown by Ryan. Ryan lifted the head of Viscount Kaiser and shouted angrily, "I have killed Viscount Kaiser. Soldiers, put down your weapons. I guarantee your rights as a kingdom knight. Single shift is temporary, and after changing the status, it will be restored to 2 shifts." End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Noble Spirit. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Noble Spirit. When Viscount Cather's head was lifted high, Ryan's words shattered the stubborn beliefs of the Andes people at this moment. According to the laws of the Kingdom of Andes, if a commander dies in battle, as guards, they all need to be buried together. They had originally planned to fight to the death, but Ryan's promise became their last straw. Except for a few stubborn elements, the remaining nearly 100 soldiers all chose to surrender. After all, in this era, the guarantee of the nobility is still somewhat valuable. Who doesn't want to live? Seeing them all lay down their weapons one by one, kneeling like quails, Ryan quietly breathed a sigh of relief. His injuries were not light, and if the other party did not surrender, he could only prepare to run away. Take off their armor, collect their weapons, and tie them all up. For a moment, only Ryan's voice echoed in this open field. Soon, the surviving soldiers began to shout Ryan's name, and his majestic figure was deeply engraved in everyone's hearts. Ryan briefly treated the wound and looked at the battlefield full of broken limbs and arms. After a moment of silence, he muttered, "Damn the war." Commanding the surviving soldiers to rescue the wounded and clean the battlefield, he himself took action and began to explore the body of Viscount Cather. He has long been familiar with touching corpses. According to the laws of the kingdom, all seizures of nobles belong to him, and soldiers only need to pay 50%. The items on Kaiser and the magician are undoubtedly the most valuable, but everyone knows that they are Ryan's spoils of war, and they are consciously avoided when cleaning the battlefield. It took some effort to remove the armor from Kaiser's body. The gilded armor is very exquisite and expensive, and can be sold at a good price in the black market specialized in selling stolen goods. Although Viscount Kaiser is not an extraordinary person, the knight's sword in his hand is not ordinary. Even without his head, this sword alone is enough to earn Ryan considerable military achievements. There was a bulging bag of coins in the pocket, all of which were brand new chandlers, totaling 100 coins. Delhi is a currency commonly used on the mainland, which is a collective term for gold, silver, and copper coins, with an exchange ratio of 1.100. A kindler is enough to last a family of 5 without worrying about food and clothing for a year. 100 jindlers, even for Ryan, were not a small sum of money. He happily put them into his pocket, fumbled for them, and found a layer in Kaiser's clothes. Upon opening it, Ryan exclaimed in surprise that there was actually a ring inside. Upon closer inspection, the ring is made of unknown metal and appears silver-white in color. It is adorned with intricate inscriptions and topped with a small piece of black crystal. It looked somewhat ordinary, but Ryan could clearly feel a strange force on it, which made him feel slightly uncomfortable, but he couldn't describe that feeling. There's something strange, there's a chance to find someone who knows what to do. He casually put it on his own hand and began searching for another corpse. Ah, let me see, what good things can be found in a noble magician. Ryan was a bit excited. This was a noble mage, and he had seen an intermediate magician by the Viscount's side before. His haughty and disdainful gaze still lingers in his memory. Just like Kaiser, this unlucky wizard has a small bag of jindlers, about 50. But that's not the focus of Ryan's attention. His current focus is entirely on the magic scroll in his hand. Magicians are a mysterious group who are proud, wealthy, and knowledgeable. They can be roughly divided into A natural mage who controls wind, fire, electricity, and ice. Elemental mage, controlling metal, wood, water, fire, earth. Mysterious mage, controlling light and darkness. A spiritual mage who controls will, mind, and spirit. A time and space mage who controls space, time, and chaos. There are also undead mages who can bring the dead back to life. The level classification is the same as that of a knight. Beginner, intermediate, advanced, master, extraordinary, legendary. And these two are the most common natural type magicians. Their beginner level makes them not outstanding in terms of casting time and number of times, otherwise Ryan and the others would have gone to see the Lord of Light long ago. He looked back and forth at the scroll in his hand, feeling a bit overwhelmed. You should know that even an ordinary person can use this thing to cast magic, although it is one time. And only mages at the master level can draw magic scrolls. In the black market, with its rarity, such a scroll can sell nearly 100 jindlers. Ha! This is. Ryan pulled out a small bag again, which contained 3 white crystals emitting a faint light. After working hard to excavate the deep memories in his mind, Ryan finally patted his head and smiled. It turns out to be a magical crystal containing magic. This is also a rare thing that wizards will spend a lot of money to buy. He carefully took out one and was about to play with it. Unexpectedly, as soon as his hand touched the crystal, the light of the crystal dimmed and eventually became indistinguishable from ordinary crystals. Ryan suddenly widened his eyes and couldn't help but curse, "Grass, what's the situation?" The young master got the fake goods. He didn't give up and took out another one, but the result was the same. Now Ryan accepted his fate and didn't dare to touch the remaining seedlings. "Lord Ryan, the battlefield has been cleaned up, but we lost a lot of supplies during the engagement. If we bring these prisoners with us, then..." Just then, an officer ran over and respectfully said. Although he didn't finish speaking, Ryan understood his meaning and after some thought, he nodded and said, "The warriors are all very lacking in combat achievements. I think they will be willing to be beautiful. Go ahead, leave 2 officers for questioning, be more efficient, and don't let them suffer." The officer's blood-stained face immediately showed a smile and saluted, "I will obey your orders, sir. You are truly a kind nobleman." The officer quickly announced Ryan's order, and there was a burst of excitement on the scene, all shouting Ryan's name. But for the Andes people, it was difficult to accept, and one of them struggled to stand up and angrily said, "Despicable, you have not kept your word and violated the noble spirit." Yila, before he could finish speaking, his head had already risen to the sky. Listening to their struggles and curses before their death, Ryan couldn't help but sneer and say, "Noble spirit. This is the choice I should make as a noble." The screams quickly stopped, and a strong smell of blood spread, making people nauseous. "Lord Ryan, Knight Allen is still alive. If the status change is approved, send Chapter 2, end of this chapter." Chapter 7. Old Jack. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Old Jack. Just as Ryan was struggling with how to proceed, an excited voice came into his ear. Ryan's furrowed brow suddenly relaxed, and he rushed over to see that it was the soldier rescuing the wounded who had dug Alan out of the pile of dead people, and surprisingly, his heart was still beating. After a slight examination of Alan's injury, Ryan frowned and had a penetrating wound in his chest. Although it did not harm his heart, it was not optimistic. If not treated in time, he could go to see the Lord of Light at any time. Fortunately, the ice cone technique not only injured his body, but also froze the surrounding wounds. Although the wounds were terrifying, they did not lose a lot of blood, at least hanging a small life. Take out the potion you're carrying to treat the injuries of Knight Allen. We must hurry to the city of Bana and seek the priest's help, Ryan said in a deep voice. He greatly admires Alan, who is upright, brave, and virtuous, and is a true knight. Few people now possess such a spirit. For example, Ryan, he is also a knight, but he does not touch on any of the 8 virtues of knights, and is a standard black-hearted aristocrat. Ordered to immediately pack up and leave the camp, no longer able to linger. Lord Ryan. The officer was somewhat surprised as it was late at night, with heavy snow falling and it was impossible to distinguish the road. If he acted forcefully, he might have been lost in the wind and snow. We just escaped a magician. If we don't leave, we'll have to stay here forever. At the beginning of killing Viscount Cather, he was indeed excited, but when he regained his senses, he felt a chill in his heart. That was a middle-class nobleman, representing a huge force behind him. He struck with all his might on the land beneath his feet, not to mention Ryan. Even his immediate superior, the highest commander of this battlefield, Viscount Malton, could not withstand it. The officer immediately realized the seriousness of the situation and ordered the withdrawal of the camp. Amidst a howling sound, the team advanced against the wind and snow for a while, and the officer named Ham once again found Ryan, stating that he could no longer move forward. Just now, it was all supported by Ryan's personal prestige, but now, any belief support has no effect. If we don't stop, the team will probably mutiny. Ryan also understood the joints, so he had to give orders to camp and rest. Fortunately, he walked more calmly, and there was also wood to start a fire. After a moment, Ryan ordered someone to carry Alan into his tent to recuperate, while he carefully inspected the surroundings and only called the officer named Ham to report the loss after discovering nothing unusual. Lord Ryan, we still have 89 people left, with only 5 cavalry and 2 prisoners. Among them, there are 5 seriously injured soldiers who may not be able to survive, and more than half of them are injured. We killed a total of 231 people and captured them. Ham said as he moved his shoulder, and the young man was also injured. Ryan was somewhat silent upon hearing this, seeming to be a major victory, as the battle damage ratio between the two sides was approaching 1.2. However, Ryan knew that half of these people were prisoners ordered to be killed by himself. If they had risen up and resisted at that time, there would have been no better way than to flee in embarrassment. The only consolation is that there are fewer heavily injured soldiers on our side, as there are very few survivors attacked by wizards during the battle. Where are those 2 prisoners? Bring them over, I want to interrogate them. Ryan had countless questions in his heart that needed to be answered by them. Soon, soldiers knelt down in front of Ryan, suppressing the 2 prisoners. The moment they saw Ryan, they became excited and kept shouting and cursing, "Butcher, executioner, and devil." Ryan frowned and had little knowledge about the interrogation. For a moment, he didn't know where to start, so he had to look at Ham on the side. Ham immediately understood and soon called an old soldier named Jack, who was about 40 years old. According to Ham, this veteran was very skilled at interrogation and could pry open a mouth as hard as a city wall. "Sir, how do you need old Jack to interrogate you?" Jack is a burly man with a simple and honest face. He arches his body and wears a pleasing smile on his face. Ryan looked at him with great interest and said, "Jack, right. My request is very simple. Ask them everything they know." "Yes, old Jack is at your service with all his heart, sir." Jack respectfully stroked his chest and paid tribute, then took a dagger from his waist and inserted it into someone's palm with lightning speed. Ah! A mournful scream suddenly soared into the sky. Ryan's eyelids twitched imperceptibly, which was too rough. Jack still wore a silly smile on his face, like an honest farmer. He seemed to have not heard the sound of the air conditioning around him, and said with a smile, "You're shouting too harshly. You'll make a noise, sir." As he spoke, his big hand directly covered the person's chin, and with a click, the person's chin dislocated. Sir, you want to know everything you know, and as you have seen, it is already late. In order not to waste everyone's time, I will cut off one of your fingers every minute. But please rest assured that old Jack's knife is very sharp and won't cause you too much pain." Jack gently gestured with the dagger in his hand, his expression unusually serious. The person couldn't speak, but a hint of fear had already appeared in their eyes. "Oh, and you, only one of you can survive. Whoever says more can survive. If you don't speak, unfortunately, every minute I will cut off one of your fingers." Jack turned his gaze to another prisoner as he spoke. Jack's abnormal appearance clearly made him afraid. Without much hesitation, he grabbed the ground with his head and said, I say. Seeing the person compromise, the other prisoner also panicked and quickly babbled that he was willing to speak, afraid that the other party would take the lead. "Oh, great, a wise choice." Jack spread out his hand, but Ryan seemed to see a hint of regret on his face. "Mad, what a pervert." Ryan secretly roast. Jack took action to reset the man's chin. He was about to speak first, but was interrupted by Ryan's words, "Wait a minute, we'll interrogate them separately. Jazz is really smart and wise." Jack also understood the meaning and immediately gave a loud flattery. After Ryan secretly explained what he wanted to ask, Ham immediately took one away, leaving only the one who compromised first to ask Ryan. "What is your name, identity, and why is Kaiser here?" He asked 3 times directly. The person had already been scared out of courage and said, like pouring beans from a bamboo tube, "My name is Matt, and I am the captain of the Viscount Kaiser Guard. We are here because the Viscount is looking for a treasure." Treasure? What treasure would make him give up on reclaiming Bana City and come with only so little manpower? Carter's eyes showed a hint of confusion upon hearing this, and he said somewhat bewildered, "I don't know what it is, I only know that it is very important to the Viscount. Apart from him, only 2 wizards and his chief knight know. We originally had a guard force of over 500 people, but..." Carter said this, with a hint of fear in his eyes. "The status change has been successful. Don't be stingy with the tickets in your hands, let's hit me in the face." End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Sources of Source Power. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Sources of Source Power. 3 days ago, we advanced lightly and arrived at the Kuwait Mountains, entering a hidden cave where the Grand Knight and the Magician accompanied the Viscount. Not long after, we felt the ground shaking and we didn't know what had happened. The Viscount and his team panicked and fled, ordering an emergency retreat. During that process, we alarmed the warcraft of the Kuwait Mountains. Those warcraft were crazy and cruel, and we lost most of our manpower during the breakout. The Grand Knight and the Knight Squad also died in their service. And then... Carter's tone trembled slightly, as if those ferocious monsters were right in front of him. The next thing was nothing more than a chance encounter with Ryan and the others, and eventually capsized the ship in the sewer. Ryan appeared calm like water on the surface, but in his heart he exclaimed for luck. The chief knight of Viscount Kaiser is at least of the rank of a senior knight, and with a knightly team, 10 Ryan tied together is not enough for them to charge in one wave. But what exactly is what Viscount Kaiser is looking for? Ryan instinctively turned his gaze to the ring in his hand, and the most hidden thing on Viscount Kaiser's body was it in no time. Ham also came back with a statement, and after comparison, there was not much difference, proving the accuracy of the intelligence. Ryan took a deep breath, his eyes gradually becoming dangerous. Being able to make Kathy personally take the risk already demonstrated its importance. If it were leaked, he was afraid he would be in big trouble. He looked around and saw only 2 prisoners present, including Ham, Jack, and 2 soldiers escorting them. How about? An evil idea was born in his mind, but it was quickly abandoned by him. After all, he was not so ruthless as to attack his own people. "Thank you all for your hard work. Let's go down and rest," Ryan said calmly as he patted old Jack's shoulder. What he didn't notice was that a faint light flashed away on the ring. Old Jack was somewhat flattered and bowed back, while Ham and 2 soldiers knelt on one knee in front of him. Ryan was a bit puzzled, but he heard Ham solemnly say, "I, Ham, will swear allegiance to you, and I will become your sharpest sword, strongest shield, and most loyal vassal." I will defend everything you have to the death. The two soldiers behind him also spoke up one after another, Lysan/Aum, swear. Ryan didn't expect them to suddenly come into this situation. Although his cheap father also had some loyal followers, it was the first time he had sworn allegiance to himself. Not to mention, this feeling is really good. As for why the other party was loyal to him, he knew with a slight turn of his head. He had killed Viscount Cather this time and had so many gains. After the war, it was definitely not a problem to reward him with a slight increase in his title. A person who gains the virtue of a chicken and a dog ascending to heaven, as his vassal, is naturally better than licking blood with the tip of a knife in this icy and snowy land. Recalling the loyalty ceremony he learned in etiquette class, he drew his sword and placed it on Ham's shoulder, saying solemnly, "I, Lord of the Kingdom, Ryan Ray Black, accept your loyalty." Gently tapping their shoulders 3 times with their swords, the ceremony was completed, and from then on they would be branded as Black family retainers, loyal to the Black family for generations to come. Of course, this is just an ordinary ceremony with no binding force at all. Only by signing a soul contract can their destinies be truly connected together. But Ryan didn't have a contract ready on him, he had to wait until the city of Bana to discuss it. Ordinary civilians are not qualified to be loyal, but as warriors, they need to be a different story. "Sir, do Jack and those 2 prisoners want to?" Ham made a gesture of wiping his neck. Obviously, Ham's loyalty was not only due to Ryan's military achievements, but also because he knew he had heard things he shouldn't have heard. This guy is quite ruthless. Ryan looked at him with some admiration, but he didn't expect that this kid was still a talented person. Not only was his mind delicate, but he was also ruthless enough. Jack is a smart person. If you dispose of those 2 prisoners, go back and rest. Dawn will soon break. Ryan brushed off the snowflakes on his body and walked into his tent on his own. In the tent, Alan is still in a coma, and his injuries are too severe. With the help of a dim oil lamp, Ryan struggled to remove his torn armor, a process that made him gasp for air. Tearing off the torn cloth between his ribs, the terrifying wound was still losing blood droplets. He picked up a bottle of medicine and opened it, emitting a foul odor that almost made Ryan take his breath away. If it weren't for his previous use of healing potions, he would definitely have thought that some troublemakers had poisoned him. The taste of this potion, which is refined from various herbs and Warcraft essence, is always not so beautiful. Fortunately, it is for external use. If he takes it internally, he guarantees to vomit out the dinner the day before yesterday. Suppressing nausea, he poured the medicine onto a cloth strip and wrapped the wound, which had a surprisingly good effect. The icy and cool feeling greatly relieved Ryan's pain. It's truly a potion worth $50 per bottle, it's worth it. Ryan breathed a sigh of relief and then opened the cloth strip on his right arm. You also have a wound that needs treatment. However, when Ryan opened the cloth strip, he was shocked to find that the wound had already begun to scar. Although the recovery power of knights far exceeds that of ordinary people, such a quick recovery is obviously not in line with common sense. Is it? Ryan's mind flashed with a flash of inspiration. After being injured, he had used a drop of source power to strengthen his right arm. Is it related to source power? Ryan was immediately excited and planned to verify it. As soon as he entered the consciousness space, he was startled. There were actually 2 little dragons, composed of source forces inside the dragon crystal. Roughly estimated to be around 20 drops, this is simply a huge sum of money for Ryan. But Ryan never believed in any windfall, except for the dragon. After trying hard to recall, Ryan finally took out a bag containing the last magic crystal. He immersed himself in the space of consciousness, holding the crystal in his hand. Sure enough, the speed of the dragon crystal's rotation suddenly increased, and a large, rich purple mist was sucked in. Inside the dragon crystal, the 3rd little dragon is formed at a visible speed to the naked eye. Looking at the crystal in my hand again, it is indeed no longer shiny. Ryan suddenly realized, almost jumping up in excitement, and said happily, I know, this purple mist is magic, and the source power is formed by absorbing the magic from heaven and earth every day. And the magic crystal also contains abundant magic, one can actually generate 10 drops of source power, that's great. I don't have to worry about the source of source power in the future. Ryan was ecstatic. Although magic crystals are equally precious, as long as he has money, everything is not a problem. Numerous magicians are willing to trade. By the way, we also need to try whether Gunli has a healing effect, but unfortunately we just used the potion. Ryan, feeling a bit sore, opened the cloth strip and used a drop of Gunli to strengthen his trunk. An explosive force suddenly exploded in his torso, and he felt the beating of his heart become more powerful. He hammered his chest, making a dull impact sound, and his ability to resist the impact was also strengthened. What a magical substance, it's amazing. Since obtaining the dragon crystal, Ryan has been shocked too many times. Immediately, he turned his gaze to the wound between his ribs. Readers, don't be stingy with the tickets in your hands. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Bana City. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9 Bana City. The result left Ryan somewhat disappointed. Although he could feel the wound wriggling rapidly, the effect was not as good as he had imagined. After patiently waiting for half an hour, the strengthening of the body disappeared, and the feeling of muscle peristalsis also disappeared. Ryan sighed deeply about this result. It was clear that Gunli did not have a healing effect, and the reason why he was able to promote wound recovery was because it strengthened his own recovery ability. And the strengthening time of the source power is only half an hour. At this speed, he needs to use at least 5 or 6 drops of source power to recover to a level that does not affect his combat power. Fortunately, we have not yet discovered any side effects of continuous use of the source force, otherwise this effect will be discounted. It's already quite good. I can't be too greedy. Maybe I should give it a try and help the poor Knight Allen. Ryan thought of what he had planned to do a long time ago. Extracting the source power and selling it. Of course, as the power of the source was unearthed one by one, he realized that he underestimated its preciousness and magic, so he no longer had the idea of selling it. But this does not prevent him from continuing to try to extract, because he has some other ideas waiting to be verified in his heart. If successful, he will open up an inexhaustible treasure. Summarizing the previous experience, mental power is the key to maintaining source power. When mental power is weak, source power will merge with the body. That is to say, he needs to extend his spiritual power outward, as this is a patent that only sorcerers or high-level knights can enjoy, and it is difficult to achieve at his level. But things are often unexpected and may be related to his identity as a time traveler. His spiritual strength far exceeds that of his peers, and he really succeeded. Looking at the sparkling power at his fingertips, Ryan showed a satisfied smile. Although he failed 8 times during practice, fortunately he didn't waste much. Because he applied all 5 of the drops on his torso and unexpectedly discovered that the effect of stacking and using source power had a significant increase. Although it was not as exaggerated as 5 times, it was also much stronger. The reason for not continuing to stack is that the stacking effect is no longer significant at the 5th drop. From this, it can be concluded that the maximum number of stacking times is 5, and any more is a waste. Ryan looked back and forth at the drop of source power, seemingly nothing special except for the majestic magic, just wondering if it would be effective for external use. Knight Allen, it's up to you to dedicate yourself to this great experiment. If you unfortunately die, I will definitely report it to you according to your death, and your family will receive a generous pension. Ryan pretended to draw a cross, then opened the cloth strip and dripped the source force onto his wound, quietly observing the wound's reaction. Poor Allen didn't even know he had become an experimental mouse. He only felt a surge of force pouring into his body, and then the wound began to itch and wriggle with a furrowed brow. Ryan observed for a while, and with meticulous insight, he noticed that Alan's wound was slowly growing pink granulation. Great, it's effective. In this case, the value of the source power has greatly increased. Ryan immediately smiled and took 3 more drops before stopping. He didn't expect to cure Alan this time because it was too shocking. He just needed to hang his life and persist until he found the priest in Bana City. Knight Alan, you must remember my selfless efforts. I'll give you 100 jindlers for every drop of source power. With just one sentence from Ryan, Alan was burdened with a huge debt of up to 400 jindlers. Alan said to himself, "Thank you, why don't you let me die instead?" The next morning a beam of sunlight pierced through the thick clouds and sprinkled on the snowfield of Kuwait, making today a great day for the creatures living on this land. The continuous snowfall and howling winds have lost their usual arrogance and begun to become tender. Ryan woke up from a meditative state, and the effect of the source power was very good. The injury in his ribs no longer affected his combat power. Alan's situation has improved significantly compared to last night, and he has fully recovered from the sickle of death. Ham. Since taking the oath to Ryan, Ham and his team have taken on the role of personal guards. They took turns guarding outside all night last night, and since they didn't disturb Ryan, he didn't say anything. Ham entered the tent in response, handed Ryan a cup of hot snow water, and informed him of the good weather outside. "Thank you for the protection of the Lord of the Light," Ryan replied casually. He did not believe in the so-called omniscient and omnipotent God promoted by the Church, but it did not prevent him from proving himself as a pan-believer, which would provide him with a lot of convenience. Command to break camp. If God's protection continues, then today we can enter the magnificent city of Bana and enjoy the wine and fruits and vegetables. You will take care of the Alan Knight for the next journey, do you know? Ryan rubbed the ring on his hand and said slowly. "I will obey your orders, sir." Soon, the team set out on their return journey again, and the good weather boosted the morale of the soldiers. Some even took the lead in singing folk songs. There are 3 crows stopping on the tree, down, 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 down. They are as black as ever, with fur on them. A knight was killed under his shield, wearing down feathers. His hunting dog lay at his feet, and their owner took care of them so well. Amidst the enthusiastic singing, a majestic city appeared before everyone. It was the city of Bana, one of the important towns of the Andes people on the snowy plains of Kuwait. It was originally an important fortress to contain the kingdom of Titan, but now it has become a bridgehead for the kingdom's attack. Before Ryan and the others had even reached the bottom of the city, an arrow made of refined iron pierced in front of Ryan like eyes. The arrow shaft was completely submerged in the snow, leaving only pitch-black feathers that trembled uncontrollably. Ryan's eyes were slightly furrowed, and he could still have such precision and strength from 300 meters away. He already knew who it was. Standing in Meringue's voice, he said, "Excuse me, is it Sir Eisen Powell? Commander of the 3rd Battalion and 7th Infantry Brigade, Ryan Ray Black pays tribute to you." "Do you mean Sir Eisen, the top archer of Bana City?" Ham exclaimed in surprise, and Ryan felt his eyes twinkling with stars. However, this is also normal. After all, he is a high-level knight with the title of Knight Falcon, and the Star Knight with the highest number of enemies killed in the entire Legion. At the same time, he is also Ryan's archery mentor. "Talk to me with a bow and arrow, Lay, it seems you have made some progress." A cold and serious voice came rolling in, mixed with a murderous aura like a golden and iron horse, capturing the soul. "Sir, my longbow has been lost on the battlefield, and besides, this is not a good place to test progress." Ryan smiled bitterly and spread his hand. "If arrows were to be used as siege, wouldn't they have to be shot into a sieve? You lost your longbow. Then you know my rules." The song in the text comes from England. 3 crows, the whole text is too long, and a part of it has been truncated. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Healing Magic. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The source has no content or has errors.